welcome to the Stroke Recovery Group. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the I Care for Your Brain Stroke Recovery Group. We are brought to you by the Foundation of First Health, and we are so happy to be here with you as we come to rule number 10. We've been through a lot together, and I hope that you're feeling that this was a valuable experience that has left you feeling educated and empowered. Before we get started with rule number 10, let's take a look at where we were last time with rule number 9, insisting on follow-up care. In session number 9, I urged you to insist on follow-up care and follow evidence-based recommendations to prioritize healthy blood flow to your brain. We talked about the fact that follow-up care after a stroke is needed for two main reasons: prevention of another stroke through behavior change and your long-term recovery. 23% of stroke survivors will have another stroke if they don't make significant health changes. So we went through the top 5 risk factors for stroke and talked about the most up-to-date recommendations for you to follow. Your post-stroke health goals should be focused on the healthy blood flow to your brain. Know your personal risk factors for stroke and reduce them by following scientific recommendations and your doctor's advice. Remember, open elastic blood vessels are happy blood vessels. We want you to understand the importance of unencumbered blood flow to the brain and to make it a priority as you go through the rest of your life. We talked about that during a medical appointment, you have 3 jobs. The first one is to communicate well. The second one is to listen well, and the third one is to receive a next step care plan when you leave the appointment if you feel like there's still more to go over, more to learn, more guidance needed. And remember, if you can't get what you need for this recovery from the healthcare system, you can always BYOB, which is to better your own brain. There's all sorts of resources out there in the world these days, many of them free, to help give you guidance on this journey. Now let's talk about rule number 10. This is really what it was all about this whole time. We're going to talk today about the transformational power of acceptance, approaching acceptance with the same tenacity that you do all other parts of your recovery. After a stroke, changes in our ability to do the things that previously defined us can be challenging, to say the least, and leave us feeling lost. The tough determination that you need to push through an intense therapy session will benefit you, there's no doubt about that, but there's also a place for acceptance at various points in your recovery. If you approach acceptance with the same tenacity that you approach all other aspects of your recovery, I promise you it can have a transformational effect. Acceptance is the non-judgmental openness to what is here right now, and can improve your quality of life and your relationship with yourself and other people. But let's not confuse acceptance with giving up. That's not what it means. And many people I've found in my journey as a neuropsychologist are afraid to have these discussions because they feel like it means they're never going to get better. They're never going to move on from the place that they are today. But I want to help you understand how to think about that a little bit different. Acceptance is a dynamic state of mind. You aren't typically in full acceptance mode or no acceptance mode. It comes and it goes. It's not a permanent feeling. Some days it feels easy, and other days it might feel like it's impossible. Acceptance versus resistance feels different in our body. When we are accepting the things that are happening to us, we have a light feeling that is accompanied many times by a sense of peace and comfort. And this is compared with resistance. Resistance is often accompanied by a heavy feeling of tension and resentment. If you believe that you must return to the exact way that you were prior to your stroke in order to be considered whole or recovered or healed, you need this message today. Even a near complete recovery does not involve you returning to a carbon copy of your previous life. The experience of having had a stroke will change your sense of self and your worldview. Acknowledging those changes and working to love yourself and others in the world because of them is the task of acceptance. Experts who study the psychology of acceptance have helped us understand that it's a process and that it typically includes 4 stages. So I want you to listen to these stages and try to figure out exactly where you or a loved one are right now today. The first stage is shock. Again, a sense of disbelief, not being able to wrap our heads around what has happened to us or what the future holds. Number 2 is what they call defensive retreat. And what this is a sense of protection that we put upon ourselves so we can't be hurt again. This is very natural to do when you feel vulnerable or something unexpectedly stressful has happened to you. Number 3 is acknowledgement. That's really what we focused on in rule number 8, is we have to get real with ourselves about how we have changed as a result of this stressor. And the final frontier is where we move into adaptation. This is figuring out how to live a life consistent with our long-term values, our long-term morals, despite physical or cognitive or sensory deficits that have come along with the stroke. The road to acceptance is filled with many pit stops and often includes 8 action steps. The first one is knowing that it's going to take time to comprehend what has happened to you. A very significant thing happened in a very short amount of time, and the brain needs days and months and sometimes years to really understand the impact of that event. Number 2 is you have to acknowledge what has changed and what you have lost. For many people, they're left after a stroke with significant impacts, changes in their ability to move their body, to see the world in the same way, to have the ability to speak in the way that they did before, the ability to walk into a room and feel confident. We have to be honest with what these changes are so we can adapt and find other ways to meet those same value goals. Number 3 is very important. Giving yourself the permission to grieve. This is where self-compassion comes back around. What you've been through is a lot. Nobody can downplay that. No one should invalidate that. But the truth is that you're in the best position to be that person who provides that needed compassion, that needed understanding. And part of that process is going to be grieving. Grieving is, again, a journey. It's not something that you can do in one afternoon, but it's also not something that necessarily sticks with you at full intensity for the rest of your life. It's a dynamic state. Number 4 is focusing, putting your attention on the things that you still can do and finding ways to do the things that are hard through creativity and the support of others. Number 5 is finding people who have thrived in the face of adversity and let them inspire you. What I don't want you to do, though, is to use this action step to think that you don't deserve compassion and validation and healing because your trauma or your stressor is not as bad as someone else's. This is not a contest. We can't compare traumas across people. But the truth is there are people in the world who have struggled through immense loss and unbelievable tragedy, and they have found a way to go forward to lead a life that they're proud of. I want you to look to their healing journey to inspire you. Chances are they've had a pretty good attitude, they've had a small circle of supporters, they've had excellent instruction, and they've done the hard work of emotional processing. So taking some tips and some guidance from them is probably a pretty good idea. In number 6, I want you to work really hard to try to find an activity or a mental interest that makes you feel strong and powerful. This might be something that you didn't do at all before your stroke, but we need you to develop new areas in life where you can build your skills in a way that really emphasizes a sense of competence and a sense of confidence. Action step number 7 is to talk the emotional journey through with a professional or someone close to you who is a good listener and will validate all of your feelings. In rule number 8, we talked all about this. This emotional part of your journey is very, very important. And if you don't know what you're feeling and you don't share it, you're going to keep it all inside you. And it is a weight on your recovery. We have a piece of what you're living through right now, which is your stroke recovery. And then the additional weights on top of it are typically things like post-traumatic stress symptoms, post-stroke depression, stuck points, unprocessed trauma that further worsens the symptoms that you're living with every day due to stroke, and we don't want that. And finally, action step number 8 is to find a way to give back. We've touched on this a couple times. Lessen someone else's pain by sharing what you've learned in your recovery so far. Whether or not you've been at this for a month, or 5 years, or 15 years, I know that you have made significant strides and that you have a lot to share with other stroke survivors. In the Stroke Recovery Guide, we included cards that are acceptance affirmations. And what affirmations are positive, empowering words that we can say to ourselves or aloud to help move us along psychologically. So I want you to get out your Stroke Recovery Guide, get a pair of scissors, have someone help you. I want you to cut out these cards and put them all around the house. These are very important messages of support. I am learning to embrace moments of peace when they happen. I accept love and affection from all the beings in my life. I accept the possibilities of what I can do in my life. And I love myself as I am right now. Sometimes it's easy to downplay these messages as corny or that's not me, but I hope you've learned in the stroke recovery journey with me here in this program that the emotional part of your healing is just as important as the physical part. Now let's make these affirmations personal to the stroke survivor community. Every day I am learning to accept the impact of my stroke. Some days are easier than others, and that's okay. I am learning to accept my current situation. I accept my current limits with the same compassion I would give a best friend. I am working towards a positive attitude in most situations. I accept the possibilities for what I can still do with my life. I celebrate my smallest victories and am appreciative for all I have gained in my recovery. I accept the responsibility to improve myself every day in whatever way that I can. I am working to let go of what I cannot control. I am working very hard every day to reach my highest recovery potential, and I love myself as I am right now. And here we are, wrapping up this very special time together. It's my hope that you feel empowered with information and motivated to apply the 10 rules of rehab. So let's take a little trip down memory lane and review everything that I hope you got out of these sessions. Rule number 1 was to make your map. What I asked you to do here is to contemplate and list all of your post-stroke symptoms, not just the things we can see, not just the things that can be measured, but to go across all important areas of your life and validate for yourself that this is something that has changed or something that you've lost. I then encouraged you to track down the very best expert in your community that can help you move yourself along in recovering that function. Experts help us figure out where we're at right now and what are the next most realistic short-term goals that we can put into place to get to our identified goals. Without a map, I'm afraid that you'll be lost in this journey and you won't find your way as easily or as successfully as you could. Number 2 is building on what's familiar. And what I invited you to do there is to personalize this stroke recovery journey. As I've said many times before, your brain was unique to start off with, your stroke was unique, and this recovery is unique. You're going to benefit from some things that another person wouldn't. And what we want you to do is bring your previous interests, your hobbies, your passions into this stroke recovery because those are the foundations that your brain is built around. Incorporating things that are personal and meaningful to you is a very smart way to power boost your recovery. In rule number 3, we talked about the incredible importance of repetition and consistency. Repetition being the fuel that promotes neuroplasticity, and consistency is the fuel of what keeps it all going. It's really important for you to understand just how many repetitions are needed to see a result. And I really encouraged you in that rule to fine-tune your vision and your mind's eye to paying attention to the smallest victories, because when you put in hard effort, you will see improvements. But sometimes we're so busy looking for the big jumps in improvement that we are blind to the very small things that are happening all around us. When you pay attention and celebrate your small victories, you're going to be positively reinforced to keep going. In number 3, we talked about the unfortunate fact that the repetitions that you're offered in traditional outpatient therapy simply are not enough. You're going to need to bring this rehab home. You're going to need to incorporate it into your everyday life to get that number of repetitions that you need in order to see progress. In rule number 4, I asked you to bring some creativity into this rehab, to harness your creative power. And we talked about very important things like the power of mental imagery, that when you just envision yourself doing something in your mind, your brain has to fire in the same exact ways that it would if you were really doing it. So using your imagination, incorporating mental pictures of yourself doing the things that you can't right now, these will help you. We also talked about the fact that you don't have to be an artist or a musician to benefit from creativity. Simply looking at art has been shown to stimulate all different parts of our brain. But most importantly, to me, the way I see the power of creativity is as an emotional tool, helping you to articulate your feelings, helping you to express those feelings, to get them out from inside to the outside world so you can be liberated from all the different ways that they weigh you down and they slow this recovery. Rule number 5 was all about balancing the hard work of rehab with long periods of uninterrupted sleep. We talked about the 5-stage sleep cycle and how it's so important to move freely throughout those stages throughout the night. We talked about the startling statistic that up to 75% of you would meet criteria for obstructive sleep apnea if you were tested. And I encouraged you to advocate for a sleep study if after following all of my behavioral strategies, you still don't feel rested. Sleep is where we clear out all of the debris that we don't want in your brain left over from the stroke. It's where we consolidate our memories from the day, and it's really the heart and soul of this recovery. In rule number 6, we talked about increasing your emotional resilience or your emotional strength. And we really emphasized on the most common barrier to an optimal recovery, which is post-stroke depression. It's unbelievably common and it goes untreated all too often. We walk through the symptoms of post-stroke depression together, and I really encouraged you to take those symptoms seriously. In number 7, we turned our focus from survivors to caregivers, and I pleaded with you to please support those who support you. You have been deeply affected by this stroke, but so have the people that love you. And I asked you to put yourself in their shoes, and I wanted you to understand that as much as they are helping you out of a true commitment to your well-being and it really being a labor of love, that the vast majority of caregivers struggle. They struggle with accepting a role and caregiver duties that were put upon them in an instant without proper training on exactly what it is they can really do. They become nurses overnight in many instances. But yet they also still have their commitments to you as a spouse, as a sister, as a brother. This is a difficult journey, and they're there because they want to be, but we need to show them appreciation. It's really important that you, as a stroke survivor, recognize that they too have their own healing journey that they deserve. In rule number 8, maybe my favorite one, we talked about the importance of acknowledging your trauma. Research tells us that 1 in 4 of you would meet criteria for post-stroke, post-traumatic stress disorder if we tested you. And many, many fewer people than that are actually getting a proper evaluation or being treated. I walked through those symptoms with you and encouraged you to think about if perhaps you are carrying some additional burden from post-traumatic stress. We talked about the importance of identifying how this stroke has affected your life in several different themes. Important issues like feeling safe in your own body, feeling safe in the world, your self-esteem, your confidence, your sense of intimacy, and your ability to connect with other people. I want you to take those questions, those reflections that I recommended to you seriously and work on them until you can get to a place where you answer those questions in a positive, self-affirming way. In rule number 9, I encouraged you to insist on follow-up care. You will develop advocacy skills in this stroke recovery journey, and I really want you to go after follow-up appointments for 2 reasons. We absolutely want to prevent you from having another stroke. You have a 23% chance of having another stroke if you don't make significant behavioral changes. And the way you're going to learn about those is by following up closely with your doctor. I also offered you some evidence-based recommendations for the top 4 risk factors for another stroke, which was hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, and atrial fibrillation. And number 2 is that we want you to reach your absolute functional potential in this recovery. Insisting on follow-up care might be something that you have to advocate for. Keep going back if you feel that there's something you don't understand, if there's more therapy that you feel like you would benefit from, if there's more questions that you have. But unfortunately, the truth is that outpatient care has its limits. And oftentimes, insurance companies don't let you keep going for as long as you might want to. And in that case, I invited you to BYOB, better your own brain. Never let the system keep you from getting as well as you could. There's plenty of high quality videos out there. Things like YouTube are an unbelievable free resource for all type of stroke symptoms. I want you to find smart, reliable, objective, trustworthy people to follow and see what they have to say about different exercises or approaches that you continue to take until you really feel like you're at your absolute best. In rule number 10, we talked all about the transformational power of acceptance. And this is really where we come full circle in the stroke recovery journey. And it's a message that I really hope that you heard with an open heart and an open mind. Going through this experience probably was incredibly difficult for you. You might have had to reach deep down and find emotional strength that you didn't even know you had. It has certainly been a life experience. And other people have walked in your same shoes, and I encourage you to seek them out. Find people just like you who understand what the subjective experience of stroke is like. As much as I want to understand, as much as your spouse wants to understand, as much as your friends want to understand, the truth is no one can understand you like yourself or another stroke survivor. So I really encouraged you to reach out and communicate. As I think of wrapping up our time together, I think the most important messages that I have for you are to please respect all of your post-stroke symptoms, to work very hard to get them identified, monitored, and supported by an expert, to accept that this is an emotional journey, not just a physical journey or a brain journey, to make sure that you are surrounding yourself by people that validate you and help you stay positive in this stroke journey. I want you to take care of your people too. We don't want this to turn into a one-way street when it's all about you and your stroke survival. We want you to continue to give back to important relationships. I want you to acknowledge that this has been difficult and you've come a long way already, and there's probably a whole lot of healing that's ahead of you. I want you to please take this information that you learned here with me and apply it to your life at every turn. But just like life, you don't have to do this recovery perfectly. You can get focused on it and work really, really hard, and then you can lose your way and come back to it. The goal is to do your best more often than not. So my parting words for you are to please remember that you are not your stroke. A stroke happened to a part of your brain. Yes, it changed a lot. Yes, you might have suffered a lot. And yes, it might have been really scary, and it still might be. You've had to rebuild, you've had to accept new challenges, but I believe that the truth is that you are still you. Continue to pursue your hobbies and your interest as best as you can. I want you to try to lose yourself in music and laughter and hugs and the stars whenever you're able. And I want to sincerely thank you for letting me be here with you as a care partner to you from afar. I wish you all the best in your ongoing, never-ending recovery. You are so strong. You are a stroke warrior, and I am so proud of you. And as we do our last self-empowerment statement together, I really want you to say this one loud and proud. I am a stroke warrior, and I am so proud of me. The Stroke Recovery Group has been based on the I Care for Your Brain Interactive Stroke Recovery Guide, and I want you to stay in touch with me. Please go to my website at icareforyourbrain.com. You can also shorten that to icfyb.com. Tell me how you're doing. Tell me if this information helped you. Ask me questions. If there's any way that I can continue to help you in this stroke recovery journey, it would truly be my pleasure. Thank you guys so much, and I truly enjoyed this time together, and I can't wait to hear how you're doing. Please take care, and bye-bye.